based on my one classroom visit, constantly alarmed by her profanity, her heavy sarcasm, and her word-perfect memory of Pushkin's verse. Every night, my grandparents eat dinner on the deck of their house, looking out over the dark waters toward Mexico. They sleep with the windows open, the moths battering their wings against the mesh screens. Unlike the other retirees I've met in Florida, they are not worried about crime. The front door is usually unlocked, and there is no alarm system. They don't wear their seatbelts in the car. They don't wear suntan lotion in the sun. They have decided nothing can kill them but God himself, and they don't even believe in him. I live in Los Angeles and write screenplays about mutant superheroes. 2 years ago, I was asked to write an autobiographical essay for a screenwriting magazine, and midway through, I realized I had led an intensely dull life. Not that I'm complaining. Even if the summary of my existence makes boring reading, school, college, odd jobs, graduate school, odd jobs, more graduate school, mutant superheroes, I've had a good time existing. But as I struggled through the essay, I decided I didn't want to write about my life, not even for 500 words. I wanted to write about Leningrad. My grandparents picked me up at the Sarasota airport. I stooped to kiss them, and they smiled up at me, always slightly bemused in the presence of their giant American grandson. At 6'2", I'm a giant next to them. On the way home, we bought pompano at the local fish market. My grandfather grilled it, adding nothing but butter, salt, and fresh lemon. Like every dish he made, it seemed incredibly easy to do, took him 10 minutes, and tasted better than anything I'd eaten that year in L.A. My grandmother doesn't cook. She is famous in our family for her refusal to prepare anything more complicated than a bowl of cereal. After dinner, my grandmother lit a cigarette, and my grandfather poured 3 glasses of homemade blackcurrant vodka. We listened to a choir of cicadas and crickets, stared out at the black gulf, and slapped away the occasional mosquito. I brought a tape recorder with me. I thought maybe we could talk about the war. I thought I caught my grandmother rolling her eyes as she flicked her ash onto the grass. What? You're 40 years old. Now you want to know? I'm 34. I looked at my grandfather, and he smiled at me. What's the matter? You guys were Nazis? You're hiding your Nazi past? No, he said, still smiling. We weren't Nazis. You thought I was 40 years old? 34, 40. She made her psh sound, always accompanied by a dismissive wave of the hand, slapping away the stupidity. Who cares? Get married, find a wife. You sound like every other grandmother in Florida. Ha! She said, a little wounded. I want to know what it was like. What's so horrible about that? She nodded at my grandfather while pointing the burning tip of her cigarette at me. He wants to know what it was like. Darling, said my grandfather. Just that, nothing else, but my grandmother nodded and stubbed out her cigarette on the glass top table. You're right, she told me. You want to write about the war? You should. She stood, kissed me on the top of my head, kissed my grandfather on the lips, and carried the dishes inside the house. For a few minutes we sat there quietly, listening to the waves breaking. He poured us fresh vodkas, happy to see I'd finished mine. You have a girlfriend? Uh-huh. The actress? Yeah. You like her? I know you do. She could be Russian, he said. She has the eyes. If you want to talk about Leningrad, we talk about Leningrad. I don't want to talk. I want you to talk. So okay, I'll talk. Tomorrow? He kept his word. For the next week, we sat together every day on the concrete deck, and I recorded his stories. A few hours in the morning, breaking for lunch, then again in the afternoon, my grandfather, a man who hated to speak more than 2 consecutive sentences in mixed company, meaning in the company of anyone other than his wife, filled mini-cassette after mini-cassette with his words. Too many words for one book. Truth might be stranger than fiction, but it needs a better editor. For the first time in my life, I heard my grandfather curse and speak openly about sex. He talked about his childhood, about the war, about coming to America, but mostly he talked